So you know what that music means. It's time to hear something good. And I get to share the screen with this wonderful looking human being who is my business partner and, more importantly, my son. And I think is uniquely qualified as we are counting down to the kickoff for Gator football this season to share his perspective on, let's call it what it is. What the fuck is going on?
Yeah, it's so interesting because I was privileged to talk to Eddie Grant back in May, I think, and he was my first guest on the DMGB podcast. And talking to him,
nice little plug for your show, by the way. That's okay. Good job. Nice. First sentence. In there. First sentence. Boom, right in there.
I'm getting good at this, doing other people's shows and plugging your own stuff.
Very nice. Very nice.
But so talking to him about the way they were handling the offseason at that point, which they had still had aspirations of coming back to work that month, or in June, and like things didn't really start to happen again until August. So hearing how they were using Zoom to try to coach kids and the way they were trying to create accountability within their own culture. Brian Johnson is another guy that I'm close with, who's the head strength coach at the University of Arizona. They were leveraging Instagram to create workout accountability within the team. They were taking videos of themselves, posting it to their stories, and tagging other players within their position group to say, hey, I got my workout in. Did you get yours? So those that were late to adapt to the changing environment, which is the case in all of life, are definitely the ones that are suffering. You saw Oklahoma State struggle with Tulsa last week. You've seen some teams get beat by group of 5 teams that they normally would have never even thought about, having a game against. And they're getting beat because if you're not the right kind of leader to build culture that will take accountability upon themselves to prepare, those teams are going to struggle.
So, to me, the take, first of all, that's great, and then I think it's pretty spot on. But as we relate, business to sports, there is the physical side and there's the mental side, and so I think we talk about distractions all the time. Is there more of a distraction than this thing that's going on in the world where actually there's 2 major distractions, Black Lives Matter, which matters, and then you've got the COVID thing with testing and, so how do you manage through that kind of distraction?
So yes, it's the biggest, baddest distraction ever, but it's the same way you should handle any kind of distraction. Number one, you have to build a process and a routine around it. Like if I was the head coach of a team, I would make sure that everybody knew when their testing was, and it was the same time every 3 days so that it didn't change for them. You're able to build a routine with it where it becomes second nature to you. We talk about process all of the time. If you can't create a process within people's environments, it's going to be really hard for them to be successful because they're constantly trying to figure out what's coming next, and they can't ever get good and create repetitions with what they're doing. So to me as a head coach, you got to create some kind of structure around the testing. And then the message would have to be, guys, it doesn't matter if there's 30,000, 100,000, 5 people in the stands. The field is still 110 yards long. It's still 53 1/3 long. And we're still trying to get a first down all the time. Like, that's it. The game hasn't changed. You're still playing the same game. So we're going to prepare the same way. And we still have to execute and do the things all we did before. All of these other things don't matter when it comes down to executing and doing what we need to do to win a game.
So I'll be the guy that calls bullshit on that and go, yeah, it doesn't matter. But you and I both know it matters. I mean, you used to being in stadiums that had 80 or 90,000 people in them. The electricity of some of the games that I was fortunate to be at last year. We talk about Gator football. That Auburn game was one of the most exciting games I've ever been at in my life. I mean, I get chills thinking about it. That's all gone, and we've talked about how crowds can influence all of that. What's your take, obviously you're not coaching now, but you are speaking to people. What's your take about playing in a stadium when no one's there? Or,
B BYOE. Bring your own energy. Like when I was coaching at Nevada, we on the regular played in front of empty stadiums. And I came from the University of Florida the year
not on
before.
purpose, right?
Yeah. I came from University of Florida the year before, where we, played Ole Miss on a Thursday night, and it was the biggest game of the year. We beat the number 3 team in the country in the Swamp. And it truly is. And the NBA players are doing an unbelievable job with it. And there was an interview with one of the guys from the Clippers who talked about it. He says it's a different environment. It is. You have to make sure that you're overly mentally prepared and that you're bringing your own motivation to the game, because you can't rely on the environment to supply that little extra juice. And I'll say this, the juice matters in the first 30 seconds of the game, right? When you run out of the tunnel and the crowd is loud and the juice is there, that lasts for kickoff and maybe the first drive. And just like in a heavyweight fight, when Mike Tyson says, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth, once the plays start happening, you get back into the routine of it, and the crowd isn't there until maybe a big third down when it's loud, or a fourth down. But you saw the Seahawks beat the Patriots on Monday night. Russell Wilson throws for 5 touchdowns in a stadium that they're used to playing in a hostile environment.
Yeah.
And they're the 12th man in Seattle, but that didn't affect Russell Wilson's play. Why? Because he believes in mental neutrality. He believes in it doesn't matter what's happening, accept the reality of right now and put the plan together of what I need to do to be successful with whatever the environment is.
So certainly great points. I go back to a couple of things. In the first weeks of pro football, we've seen a ton of injuries. So maybe the physical side of the game, people are not up to speed. They didn't have enough practice. They didn't hit enough or whatever. But, I come back to with college, these are 18 and 19 and 20-year-old kids, that have not been exposed to this kind of distraction. Adults are adults. It's a profession. They're getting paid for it. You and I, Joe Mullings, who I love, said, put on the fucking chin strap. Let's go. Not so easy with an 18-year-old kid. So would you talk to, you've coached kids for the last 10 years. You did a wonderful job of it, and it was a passion of yours. What do you think coaches are going through now, knowing that these are still 18-year-old kids?
Yeah, it's got to be really, really difficult to get enough communication to them, because this is where, and I've always said this as a coach, you weren't just a coach, you were a father figure, right? I wasn't just trying to make them the best football player that they could be. I was trying to make them successful for life. I was trying to teach them that how everything we were doing and all of the fundamentals that I was trying to instill in them were going to carry them to business, going to carry them through their relationships for the rest of their life. So you really almost have to overly turn on that father figure hat, because this is really trying to get them to understand the magnitude of the moment that they're in, that the game has never really been played in this kind of environment before. There's no kind of precedent that we can rely on to know what's going to make us successful, other than relying on the fundamentals that we know of preparation, of focus, and being bought in and all into what we're doing, and being accountable to one another. So managing an 18-year-old kid who sees all of his friends at school still going out, not wearing masks, and doing all the things that, if he partakes in, will immediately hurt the team and possibly ruin the season. The communication, which, as we talk to leaders across all organizations, communication is always number one. It's impossible to over communicate in this kind of situation.
I think that's really well said. So, here we are, we're at countdown to kickoff. The SEC is later than most. The Big Ten just announced that they'll come back. So certainly the staggered start and all of the craziness that goes on. Does it stir memories for you of when you were coaching, how you were coaching, what's your mindset? Because I really, and I hope you're okay that I went there, but I'm
Sure.
just kind of curious, does that itch ever go away, or do you satisfy it with other stuff? Or,
So
I think it's a,
speaking of Gator football, I actually had a call with my long snapper who was there at the University of Florida, Ryan Farr, just last week. I think it was Thursday or Friday of last week, because he was involved with this startup in New York. They were doing really well. They were in the travel industry. They were in the tourism industry. COVID hits. They get whacked. He loses his job. He moves back to California, and he's sitting at home trying to figure out, like, did I get out too soon? I feel this itch to play. What should I do? And I had the conversation with him about understanding that it never goes away. There's nothing that's gonna replace the game. There's nothing. There's absolutely nothing. The thing that I go back to when I think about should I go back, would I go back, is I don't miss any of the other bullshit that went along with earnings Saturday. I don't miss any of the politics of the coaching world. I don't miss the bullshit of showing up on a Sunday and having to eat shit from a head coach because he feels like his opinion, what lost the game is what happened, when everybody else in the room is going, this guy's out of his mind. I don't know what he's talking about. So dealing with those kinds of things and not necessarily having a true team environment all the time, I don't miss any of that shit. I don't miss the 16 hours a day on a Monday when it's fucking pointless and it's inefficient, and like the no control over what we did or how we did things was hard. I don't miss any of that, but there is no substitute for a game, for being in there, for even the loss. And I talked about this with Gabby the other day. The emotional roller coaster that you ride, even within the 60 minutes, and the constant reevaluation of what's the situation, what's the plan we're putting together, because we've only got another half left to win this game. And once this half is over, this opportunity's gone. It's not coming back tomorrow. That mentality and living in that world doesn't exist anywhere else. It's very similar, and I don't like saying it, but it's similar to the military, where everything they do, life is on the line. Your life isn't on the line, but that opportunity is a one-time opportunity that you'll never get back.
I think that no one will ever really understand that until you live it. But obviously, there's two things I want to cover before we're done today. Number one is, what are the memories you have from working in Gainesville? I mean, as an alumni, I going to Gator football was amazing. When you got hired at University of Florida, I was completely out of my mind. And so as we're focusing on University of Florida this week, maybe one or two stories that you can share with people that were like, wow, stories of what you take away from University of Florida. And then as we close after that, just give you some time to sort of organize your thoughts. So many parallels to the business world now. Can you tie that in a bow for people of what you took away from coaching the kids and in that environment? How have you applied that? And obviously your roadmap, your early roadway for in the business world has been very successful. It's been amazing watching you. So talk to me about some memories, and then talk to me about, parallels between the business world and sports world.
And first, I want to say I'm so excited for SEC football to come back, because having coached in the SEC, the ACC, the AAC, the Mountain West, and the Patriot League, I can tell you that there is nothing like coaching in the SEC. There's nothing. There's no level of competition that is at that level week after week after week.
Year after year after year after year.
And to the point of when I pulled up the list of games last Saturday, I was like, there's legitimately not one game that I give a shit about today. Like you might have to pay me to watch these games. So I'm really happy that the SEC is back. I'm excited to see how their preparation, how some of the best in the game to do it have done it, and what the product's going to look like. So we beat Tennessee for the first time and I think it was 7 years in our first year there. And that was the Hail Mary down the sideline. I'll never forget Antonio Callaway catching that ball and turning to the inside and breaking the tackle. And I saw it, the whole sideline saw it. There was nobody between him and the end zone, and everybody started sprinting down the sideline. And his mom was in the end zone, and he ran right up to her in the end zone. Like that moment, and that really sparked a culture that season that we would just continue to do what was necessary to win. And a lot of ups and downs in that. But a story that I'll give to you is,
aren't you in that highlight? Isn't that you?
Oh yeah, there's a great picture of me pointing. I'm literally pointing down the sideline as he's starting to run, and I remember all of us running down the sideline. And it was so great.
Man. I get chills, man.
And so the end of the year, we're playing Vanderbilt at home, and we struggled on offense the way we had the entire year. And at that point, we had real kicker issues. Like we couldn't make an extra point. We were to the point there were a couple kids that gotten hurt. We had a full mass tryout on campus.
I remember that.
I evaluated 350 kids. Like there was frat guys coming out of every frat house thinking they could walk onto the football team in a kicking tryout. So I put together this plan. We had 3 kickers. I had 3 scenarios on who was going to kick what and what we were going to do. And sure enough, the game comes down to a game-winning field goal. And I'll never forget looking in Austin's face, who was the kicker who was supposed to be an All-American and just could not get it together mentally and was up and down. And, you know, Max yelling at me in the mic, who's going to kick the field goal? Who's going to kick the field goal? And I just looked in Austin's eyes and I said, can you do this? And he said, I got it. And I didn't fucking hesitate. I said, Austin's kicking it, and sent the kid out on the field who nobody had a real belief in, but I just went with my gut in that moment. And I didn't even watch it go through the uprights. Snap, kick. I heard it off of his foot. I turned around and walked the other way, and I said, that's the ball game. And sure enough, it went through. And there's a great picture of him standing there, just full emotion coming out of him. And just a great story of you know, how kids can overcome things and how anybody can overcome adversity if you just believe in yourself in that moment. And if you have belief from other people, what can happen?
I'm going to jump on that story because a lot of what you talk about is the way that you give feedback to other people. I've heard you do that in our daily huddle. I've heard you do that in some of the client engagements you're in. So why don't you just pop that on the end of that? Because that is so important, that crucial time and the way that you give feedback is how you really build people. So
especially in a coaching world where in football it's been normal to just berate people, right? It's very military style, like boot camp-esque, and that's really not the way to lead anybody anymore, much less this Gen Z group that's coming through. Because in certain moments of time, you may think that you're doing somebody a service by telling them what they did wrong. But if they've already realized that they've done it wrong, or they already feel bad about it, and you deliver that blow to them in that moment, you could crush their confidence forever. You could ruin their self-esteem, and it will take you double the time just to try to get them back to that moment, as opposed to understanding that might be the moment to pick them up, or to just say, hey, that wasn't it, but we'll talk about it when you'll be fine. And then finding that time and that coachable moment to then deliver the feedback, which we talk about it with leaders all the time. With the way you're able to communicate through video now, why anybody feels the need to give immediate, direct, hard feedback on somebody, I don't understand. Right?
Yeah,
if you really want to.
Culturally, I grew up with that kind of feedback. It was real time. It was in front of people. You know, I then became that leader, realized it didn't work. And so I had to do that pivot, that shift to do that, because I realized I wasn't getting the best out of people. Your brother, when he played quarterback, did not react well to yelling. And you're like, dude, I get it. I know he was coaching,
and he is that Gen Z population. They're just emotionally their emotional intelligence is different than what we've come
Well
through.
said.
And
Well said.
I think I was the end of that, where I was raised in that environment and coaching. Like, if you got asked for something, that meant it should have been there yesterday, and you were going to get chewed out until you got it there. I didn't choose to continue that cycle. I chose to, and it was because I learned. I listened. You and I have these dialogues all the time. We had them all the time. And so now getting a chance to work with leaders across different organizations to teach them that there are better ways to communicate, easier ways to communicate, to get actually more out of the people.
Yeah.
And just being self-aware enough to understand that you got to understand where that person is before you're ready to coach them.
Fantastic perspective as we sort of close out this, and you and I can talk all day long. Actually, we do. It's just not on the show, which is, I'm thrilled. I pinch myself. So you've led a charmed life. You've been in some great places. You've coached for some of the greatest names in the game. Now you take all of those things and you say, I want to get in the business world. Tie us up as we go to kickoff this week. What are the major takeaways from coaching kids, coaching football, being in an 80,000 seat stadium? Because when we make a mistake, there's nobody over our shoulder yelling and screaming at us. The crowd's not booing. So what are the takeaways?
I'd say perspective, purpose, process, accountability, and relationships. Like, if I had to build my life on 5 pillars, that would really be, because perspective to me is, you have to constantly be able to evaluate the current situation you're in and not believe that it's ever going to go back to what it was. You have to constantly be forward facing. So accepting the circumstances that you're in, regardless of whose fault it is or what happened, accepting what the reality is and building a plan to go forward. Process then, because if it's not rinse and repeat, if you're not able to build routine, which is what I talked about earlier, what I would do with testing, I gotta be in a routine. I gotta have my rhythm about what I'm doing, how I'm communicating, everything. I think that's the fundamental of success, because process is going to lead you to time management, which is going to lead you to accountability, relationship, because at the core of relationship is communication. And the reason I was successful in coaching is because I built quality relationships with the kids that I was coaching and the coaches that I was coaching with. And I could always go back and get another job at any point because they know that I'm genuine and authentic. And I would always do anything to help the team win, because that was my purpose and my passion. I believed in what I was doing. And that's, that's awesome. There you go.
I mean, you could literally take those 5 pillars and say football coach or business leader, and they are the same. The responsibility is the same. It's all about execution. You can talk the talk, but you got to walk it every day. And thank you for spending time. I know you are super busy, but as we head into the weekend, it's an exciting time. Any last words about your brother coaching? I mean, does he lean on you? And because he'll be our last guest of the week, he's going to close it out on Friday. It's like our pep rally with him. He's actually working for the team.
He doesn't need to lean on me. He's done a great job of building his own, his own belief, his own philosophy, his own perspective. It's great to hear from him and to be able to bounce off. Sometimes he'll shoot me a message and be like, hey, what would you do here? And I'll tell him what I'm thinking. And I'm thinking the same thing. And cool. So it's cool to have that dialogue still. But I'm excited for him to have another season, and hopefully they're able to be successful, because in a year where you would normally say, these are the teams that are going to win no matter what, it's just not the case this year. Whoever handles this environment and the preparation the best are going to be the teams that are going to be successful at the end of the year.
I think you're awesome. Thank you so much for spending the time with us. Go Gators, man. You're wearing a Gator shirt. I got you to wear a Gator shirt.
Yeah, I had to do it for the show, and as long as they're not playing Florida State, I've got no qualms about rooting for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And that could be another whole show about Florida State. So we'll leave that there. But you're the best. You make me very proud. And voila.
Go
Stay
Gators.
on the ball.